I have all these photos of all your polyps, their size, their location, and now there's nothing there. So how did this happen if you didn't have surgery? And I said, well, I changed my diet. He goes, well, that's impossible.
Welcome to Believe in Progress, the American Association for Cancer Research Foundation podcast. Join us and be inspired by the incredible stories of those who have faced cancer with strength and resilience, and the medical professionals who are working tirelessly to find new treatments and ultimately a cure. Believe in Progress isn't just about the science of cancer. It's about the human side of this disease. Together, we can make progress in the fight against cancer and bring hope to those who need it most. What happens when a celebrated plant-based chef who has spent decades teaching people how to heal with food finds herself facing cancer? How does someone who has spent her life advocating for health navigate her own diagnosis? These are the questions we'll explore in today's episode of Believe in Progress, the podcast brought to you by the American Association for Cancer Research Foundation. I'm your host, Mitch Stoller, Chief Philanthropic Officer at the AACR. Today we have a truly inspiring guest, Chef AJ. She's a renowned plant-based chef, best-selling author, and educator with over 47 years of experience in whole food, plant-based nutrition. You may know her from her hit YouTube channel, Healthy Living with Chef AJ, or from one of her many books, including Unprocessed, How to Achieve Vibrant Health and Your Ideal Weight, and the Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss. For decades, Chef AJ has been a champion for health eating, providing that food can be nourishing and delicious. But in early 2023, she was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer, a reality she publicly shared in November 2024. Now she's using her massive platform not just to share her signature salt-free, sugar-free, and oil-free recipes, but to talk about cancer, health, and resilience. We will include links to Chef AJ's books, website, and social media accounts in the show notes for this episode. So please go to the show notes if you want to follow Chef AJ or are interested in one of her books. While you're in the show notes, make sure you also subscribe to this episode and maybe share it with a friend or family member who might benefit from listening to our conversation. In this episode, we'll discuss Chef AJ's personal journey from junk food vegan to whole food advocate. Her cancer diagnosis has reshaped her mission, the role of nutrition in cancer prevention and recovery, and how she's using her platform to educate and inspire others facing health challenges. The mindset and lifestyle changes that have helped her navigate this new chapter. Chef AJ's story is one of passion, purpose, and perseverance. Whether you're interested in plant-based eating, seeking inspiration, or navigating a health journey of your own, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Chef AJ, so nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I really would like you to talk a little bit about, how you got started, as Chef AJ.
Well, I think I got started as Chef AJ when I was 8 years old. That would have been 1968 because I received an easy bake oven for Hanukkah. And
Okay.
I was just fascinated with, actually became a pastry chef when I did after graduating culinary school, not like an executive chef that was making savory foods. I just thought that was the coolest thing because with baking, more so than cooking, there's like science involved, like the way things rise. And just like, well, first of all, I always loved dessert, but like being 8 years old, you could look in the little window and this light bulb, like a cake would like magically appear. And so I really think that that's kind of what started me out being Chef AJ, was getting this easy bake oven. But then when I was 11 years old, I used to live in the south side of Chicago, and my parents wanted to move to California to be with all of our other relatives, but it took a lot longer to sell the house and my dad's business. So for a year, my sister and I lived in California with an aunt and uncle. And my uncle, who was my mother's brother, married a lady who was French Swiss. And her mother, who we called Maymay, lived with them. And Maymay was a cordon bleu chef. She had a 5-star restaurant in Switzerland. She didn't speak English, but she made the meals every single night from scratch. She never wrote down a recipe. And it was so sad when she passed away, we didn't have her recipes. But I watched somebody actually make a meal every single night from scratch. And it was so fascinating because she didn't use any processed foods, really. I mean, she went to a store. There's a store still there in North Hollywood called Gelson's. And, she'd buy the fresh stuff. And at 11 years old, I was eating things like leeks. I mean, what 11-year-old eats leeks?
Right.
But she made, and it was very rich. It was French food. And it was the most delicious. It was literally like eating in a restaurant every night, but it just fascinated me watching her because she didn't use recipes. And that's my favorite way to cook or bake. It was so hard for me to write 4 books because people wanted recipes. And I'm like, I don't use recipes. It's kind of like intuitive, but she would just take ingredients and then a pear galette would appear. And so I think that just kind of it instilled in me that how fun cooking was. A lot of people think it's a chore. And I do think there's certain parts of it like chopping onions, but nowadays you can buy chopped onions that are kind of tedious. But I think it's just a beautiful art form. And the best thing about it is like, unlike other art forms, if you make a mistake, you get to eat it. So
Right. Chef AJ,
yeah.
I'm based in Philadelphia. I'm just curious, where'd you go to culinary school?
I went to culinary school in California. It was a raw vegan culinary school called Living Light Culinary Arts Institute. But believe it or not, I went to Penn.
Early on, you went there for a couple years, or did you go all 4 years?
I only made it until I think I went there freshman year, sophomore year, and part of my junior year. Do they still have the Frog there? That was a really fancy, fine restaurant in Philadelphia, the
I
Frog.
don't. If they do, I'd have to ask my guys here, but I'm not really sure if they have that or not. I asked you about the culinary school because I know in Poughkeepsie there's a famous culinary school of America, I think it is.
Nice.
But
There's a few of them. What about
yeah,
Bookbinders? Is that still in Philadelphia? Bookbinders?
it closed, but I think they're trying to perhaps reopen it. Why plant based? Why did you want to go in that direction?
For me, it was always about the ethics. That is the whole reason I became vegan. And so when people say, see, your diet didn't save you, and it's like, well, I would have done it anyway because I was doing it for ethical reasons. I was always just kind of a squeamish kid, I remember once somebody took me fishing, and just the idea of like putting the hook on this like living worm or living, like I just loved animals. What could I tell you? And I wanted to be vegan as a child. I didn't have that word, by the way, because I don't think it necessarily existed. But I always struggled with eating animal products, just the visual of them. And the nice thing about being raised Jewish and kosher is that there was a lot of animal products I just never ate because they weren't allowed. So I never had a cheeseburger or bacon or pork chops or clams or shrimp or crabs or lobster or all these things that people find delicious, or even like, a pepperoni pizza. So there weren't very many animal products to even eat, but the ones that were there, I was always disgusted by them. Like if there was a rare piece of meat, I could only eat it if it was the end of the roast where it was burned beyond recognition. Or I could only eat something if ground beef was like in a chili. But if it looked like it, even as a little kid, I said, I can't eat this. And my mom was respectful of that. So we never had things like ribs or like lamb chops if it had a bone, or, oh gosh, God forbid, fish. Like I could eat tuna because it was in
Hmm.
a can,
Hmm.
but the way they would always serve fish at restaurants, the bone and the head was on, and it's like that's an animal. I couldn't eat that, and so I didn't. But again, there was this. And there's still a misconception today that if you don't eat animal flesh, you're not going to get enough protein. So my mom said, well, you have to eat animals, but she made it in a way where I didn't have to think about it. But the day that I left home for Penn, September 1st, 1977, pretty much I became an instant vegan. The problem is for the first 26 years, I was a very unhealthy, obese
You
vegan
say it's
because
junk food vegan, right?
yeah, they call it a vegetarian because I wasn't doing this for health. By the way, until I was 43 years old, which is 22 years ago, I had no idea that food had any impact on us at all, on your health. I mean, I just figured everything was genetic. I was actually obese. I was 70 pounds more than I weighed now. I just figured this is my genetics. Food has nothing to do with anything. I just ate what I liked and I took out the animal products. And then what happened is after 26 years I've been vegan 47 years now, I had a wake up call because, and it's funny because now that I actually have cancer, I wonder like, oh boy, maybe, I think back to the fact that I was actually diagnosed with pre-cancer in 2003, if there is such a thing. So what happened is on January 1st, 2003, shortly before my 43rd birthday, I started really bleeding internally, like every time I used the bathroom. And at the time I had an HMO that would not do a colonoscopy on me, which I think like today they would have, but no, because you didn't have a mother or a father that died of colon cancer. It didn't matter that I had other relatives with colon cancer. All they would do was a sigmoidoscopy on me. And they found that my sigmoid colon was riddled with what they actually called edematous precancerous polyps. And they said, if we don't remove these, you will get colon cancer. Well, the thing is because I had such a horrible diet until the age of 43, meaning it might have been vegan, but it was Coke Slurpees and Dr. Pepper and every kind of candy cake, cookie pie, and ice cream, but it was vegan. And I never had any fiber. I never had fruits or vegetables or whole grains and legumes. I don't want to say never, but it was not a large part of my diet. They weren't able to remove the polyps during the normal procedure as they normally can because my colon, they called it, was dirty, because even with the prep, they couldn't see to get these polyps without risking infection. And they told me that I was going to have to come back and have actual like surgery, like where they cut you. And it's like, this is why it's been so hard for me to get lung cancer treatment, because when I was a teenager, I had an allergic reaction to a general anesthesia
Mm.
and difficulty getting unintubated.
Mhm.
And I ended up almost on a ventilator, but in the hospital for a very, very long time for what was going to be a same day procedure. And since then, I actually developed a true phobia of surgery and anesthesia, which is why I haven't had my lung removed yet, even though that's what they wanted to do. But anyway, so that's when I learned for the first time that what we eat has a profound effect on how we look and feel and what diseases we get and what diseases we can reverse. Now, I know now that diet isn't everything. It's important, but what I'm learning is, because my diet has been pretty much pristine and stellar for the last 21 years. So how did I get cancer? Well, the diet, it can certainly help. And I believe that it helped me delay this diagnosis and maybe have the tumor grow slowly. I don't know. The way it's been described as me is your diet is a seatbelt. And we wear a seatbelt because that's the law, number one, but also because it can often protect us in a serious accident. But that doesn't mean it's 100% protective, right?
Right.
And that's kind of how I feel about diet. And so many oncologists now are saying it doesn't matter what you eat. And even at the infusion center where I go, the only snack available is cheese and pudding. And I happen to be allergic to milk. And they sell in the vending machine at the hospital where I go, Sutter, Cheetos and Snickers, and there's not one healthy thing to eat. But anyway, after having this sigmoidoscopy and finding out I would need surgery, what happened is I said no because I was too afraid. And so I ended up going to a place called the Optimum Health Institute in Lemon Grove near San Diego, California. And that's when I learned that, wow, what you eat has a huge impact. And so I followed not just a vegan diet, but a whole food plant-based diet without sugar, oil, salt, or flour, or caffeine, or alcohol. And their diet was raw. I did not stay raw. So I call it SOFA's free, no sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, or salt. It also had no caffeine. It was basically unprocessed,
Mhm.
meaning foods that come from a plant, rather foods that are manufactured in a plant. And I followed that way of eating. And then 3 months later, I went back to have another sigmoidoscopy, and I got the same doctor, interestingly enough. And he told me that all the polyps were gone, that my colon was clear, clean, and vascular like a newborn baby. And he wanted to know where I had the surgery. And I said, but I didn't have surgery. He goes, well, I have all these photos of all your polyps, their size, their location, and now there's nothing there. So how did this happen if you didn't have surgery? And I said, well, I changed my diet. He goes, well, that's impossible. And when he left the room, there was an assisting GI doctor who I believe was Indian from her accent. And then she whispered so he couldn't hear, well, I believe you. And it was then that I realized that food does matter, and yes, genetics is still maybe one of the most important things about life and how long we live, but how well you eat and your other lifestyle habits can really determine on how well you live.
Right, right, right. So, you were diagnosed stage 3 lung cancer 2023. Could you talk to us a little bit about that diagnosis?
I first was diagnosed at stage 1, and it wasn't after I got to stage 3, that's when I realized, dude, this time, did you ever watch Scooby-Doo? Did you ever watch
Oh,
the
of
Scooby-Doo
course.
show?
Yeah.
So I love Scooby-Doo. I have a huge Scooby-Doo collection that I'm actually trying to donate, and I wish one of the cancer places would take it, because I need to let it go now so that I can buy a second refrigerator because I'm juicing. But anyway, that's an aside. But in Scooby-Doo, they always would say, in the movies like Zombie Island, like, this time the monsters are real. And so now it's like, this time the cancer is real. So
Right.
it all started. Oh my gosh. And this happens to so many people. Incidentally, they're called incidental pulmonary nodules. So in other words, I never had a symptom of lung cancer. And to my knowledge, I still don't, other than the symptom of terrible anxiety from having cancer. But I
Right.
never had, I am an asthmatic and I do have adult COPD, but didn't have any lung symptoms. And what happened is, when I moved from Southern California to Northern California, I had to get all new doctors. And it turned out I had a urinary tract infection that was misdiagnosed as interstitial cystitis. I did not have a very good doctor when I moved here, and it turned out all I had was a simple UTI, but he was treating me for a disease I didn't have that was horrible to think you have it, because it was so painful, because I had an untreated UTI and I had to get all these procedures, and it was just, and I said to my primary doctor, I said, look, I am in these groups for people with interstitial cystitis. I do not have this disease. I don't know what it is. This was until it was determined all I had was a UTI. But I said, please look for something else that's causing this severe pain. So they ordered an abdominal CT scan. It may have been an MRI, but they ordered something that was just abdominal, and it was with and without contrast. And this was now August of 2022, and it picked up that I had 4 millimeter, they called them nodules or tumors, on my lung and my liver. And so, of course, being a highly anxious person, I was very alarmed. And the doctor said, oh, don't worry about it. Sometimes they're just scarring, they're nothing, and you seem healthy and fine. But in 6 months, we'll do a full CT scan of your lung. So 6 months happened to be my birthday, March 22nd. And the last thing you want to do on your birthday
Right.
is to have a CT scan.
Right.
So I'm getting very good at memorizing dates. So the day after my birthday, March 23rd, I had a lung CT scan, and it showed that I had a 14 millimeter spiculated nodule on my left lower lobe. And I didn't know what any of this meant. My primary doctor said, well, don't worry. Cause it could be something else. Cause it can, there can be fungal infections. There can be things that aren't necessarily cancer. And he said, well, we'll do a PET scan. So I had a PET scan. And then on April 14th of 2023, through my chart, there's no, remember the old days? I mean, you look maybe like you're old enough to remember when you used to go to a doctor, and if they had bad news or some news, you'd get a call on the phone. This is Dr. So-and-so. And they would tell you, well, that's not the way it is today. You have your phone, and you have this thing called My Health Online,
Right.
and everything is dumped in your chart
Right.
before the doctor even
Not very
sees it.
personal.
And that's kind of one of the worst ways to be diagnosed with cancer, especially because it was 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, which means there was nobody I could even contact for 48 hours. And it was like right before I was supposed to go on the air with my show. And it's like, oh my God. So that was very, very, very stressful. So that was stage 1A, adenocarcinoma. But here's the thing. I didn't have a lung biopsy until December of 2024, last year. And that's kind of a long and convoluted story, but it was the reason I didn't have a lung biopsy. There's a saying in cancer treatment, no meet, no treat, right? If you don't have tissue. And the reason is the tumor was, I was willing to do whatever they said in terms of getting imaging, even every 3 months, which I think is a lot, but now I generally do 6 months of PET or CT. And they were willing to do what was called watchful waiting, because I didn't have any symptoms, and the tumor was small, and it appeared to be very, very slow growing. Now, of course, I had the option of getting my lung removed. I saw a thoracic oncology surgeon. He said, well, we can take it out, but we can't get any clear margins because it's like less than 2 millimeters from your aorta. There were no metastases at the time. And the thing is because of my past history with general anesthesia, it just didn't sound like something I wanted to do. And before I had got involved in the cancer space, talking to so many people now that have had complete lobectomies, it did not sound like a cakewalk, this operation. Even when it's done well with robotics, the people that I've talked to said it is a very difficult operation. They've even used the phrase, I felt like I was run over by. And so I wasn't really excited about this surgery to lose my entire left lower lobe, especially because having COPD, I didn't think I had the lung function to do it. And I couldn't get pulmonary function testing because at the time my insurance wouldn't even pay for it. And I thought, well, this doesn't sound like a very good thing. So the thoracic oncology surgeon said, well, you can have radiation. And so I went for a consult, and she was very nice, the radiation oncologist. And she said, well, the kind we do here at our medical institution is called photon. You need proton. And so I went to look at some of the other institutions like Stanford and UCSD, but because I didn't have Medicare yet, for proton, they don't pay for it. And it's like really, really expensive. But then when she told me like the potential side effects are to radiation, it sounded maybe less scary, at least the having of it, than the surgery. But there are some serious side effects you can get. Some people don't, but I was so concerned because the tumor is so close to my heart that I had a cardiology consult. And she said, yes, it's a real thing. There have been people that have had to have open hearts, that have had to have open heart surgery afterwards or have heart transplants. I mean, they do their best, but I'm thinking, how are you going to hit the tumor without hitting my heart? And it's in them, and then the swallowing thing. So, you know, I'm not saying I will never have surgery or never have radiation. I've learned in life, never say never, but they didn't sound like great options to me, especially when I had no symptoms and it wasn't growing. So, as far as getting a medical oncologist, that took a lot longer. It took about a year and a half because of the way the system is right now. It is very hard to get a doctor, at least where I live, but also because I couldn't get a doctor without a biopsy, a tissue biopsy. And just like the old saying, you
Mhm.
can't get a show on Broadway until you get a show on Broadway. Well, I couldn't get a tissue biopsy because at the time when it was 14 millimeters, the people that I was seeing at my medical institution said that's very hard to biopsy because it's right in the center of your chest. It's really small. And what the surgeon was saying is even if it is cancer, you can still have a biopsy that does shows it's not cancer. And so I was basically told I couldn't get a biopsy. And until you get an oncologist, you can't get any of the supportive services that I now get, like the free wig and going to the support groups. But finally, I found an oncologist that was willing to see me, but it still was a long wait to get to her because I paid $2,200 of my own money to get what's called a liquid biopsy. And the liquid biopsy showed, and they said with 96.7% accuracy, that I did have lung adenocarcinoma.
Mhm.
So I saw her for the first time in October of 2024. And I said, look, and like, they can't do chemotherapy without a tissue biopsy or immunotherapy. And, she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I really don't want to do anything. I really don't want to be here.
Right.
And I said, I'd like to just continue to do watchful waiting for a little bit longer. So then when I had my imaging in, I guess it was October or November or 2024, um, I actually had heard about this new kind of radiation therapy called the reflexion machine. I had lunch with a gentleman that happened to work on the machine. It was just such a coincidence. And he was talking about how this machine is really great for lung cancer. It's FDA approved, Medicare pays for it, and that can even maybe deal with metastases. And at the time, I didn't know I was stage 3. And I thought, well, that sounds great. This sounds better. So I scheduled an appointment with a radiation oncologist at Stanford to see if I could have this done because I kind of felt like I'd be in good hands with Stanford, a major medical institution known for its cancer care. This machine sounded amazing, but he wanted imaging. And unfortunately, the imaging showed now I am stage 3 with a metastases in the bronchial lymph node, no longer eligible for this particular type of radiation. And so then, like I joked with Scooby Doo, that freaked me out because it was like being diagnosed twice.
Right.
It's like the first time was just kind of being hit like slapped in the face, and the second time was being punched so hard, like I don't know if I'm going to get up. And so that's when I decided to have the lung biopsy. I was scared to have the lung biopsy. Well, now the tumor was either 21 or 28, but now it was big enough for them to biopsy. And I went to an interventional radiologist, and because I'm anxious and because of my past experience with anesthesia, I said, before you do this, I'd like to have a face-to-face consult. He agreed. I said, look, I'm the most anxious patient you ever could meet. And I will do this if you'll do this with no anesthesia. And he goes, not even a local. I go, no, local's fine, but not even the sedation, no propanol. He goes, okay, I can do it. And he did. And he said, when it was 14, he said, I don't think I would have gotten it. And he did get it. But I did get a pneumothorax, but I did get the tissue. And I was very happy I did because I am a very strong match for an immunotherapy drug called Keytruda. And I was always like, I mean, you don't always get to choose what you want in
Of course
life, but
not.
I was thinking that just this was in my head, just from the holistic type doctors I see who are kind of not fans of necessarily chemotherapy. I was thinking in my head, boy, wouldn't it be great if I was a match? And I was a strong match. And so I did have one treatment, which kind of went bad because they gave me an infiltration,
Mhm.
which means I did not get all of the drug. But I'm hoping Stanford will want to continue that. And I also have an appointment with the City of Hope, and I'm very comfortable doing that.
How do you feel? I mean, your energy level is outstanding, and you look great. I mean, how do you feel?
Well, I feel physically I feel fine. And this
Yeah.
is the thing. It's like it's funny. I think I'm going through those 5 stages of grief over and over. And I go through them different times. And I feel like in a lot of the times I'm in denial because I'm not thinking about cancer because I feel so well.
Right.
That said, I'm in a lot of support groups and a lot of people say that unfortunately with certain types of cancers, you don't feel it until it's so far advanced.
Support groups helpful for you?
They are overall helpful, but they can be sad as well. And
Of course.
this is the thing, because what happens is what's great about support groups is you get information that you may not get on the street, right? Because these are but when you meet people like I met an angel, and I literally call him an angel because I met a guy who befriended me, and I didn't even ask him to. Like I was thinking like to myself, like I wish I could have his, like I was a little shy. I was like, he's 17-year lung cancer survivor, and I'm like, God, I wish I could talk, but I was a little shy on the Zoom, and then he ended up looking me up, and then contacting our help desk, and he's there for me. Like I can text him, and he walked me through the lung biopsy the night before. So without going to groups, it might be hard to meet people like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then again, everybody else is going through this, and so they're not always doing well. And so far, I haven't lost anybody in groups. I have lost, yeah. So this is the problem with cancer is
Yes.
like you're when you make when you make friends with people with cancer, they're not, it's kind of like I think about, Saving Private Ryan, no one is left behind, but with cancer, so, some people are going to die
I understand
and
that.
you don't know who they are. So, I recently just lost someone who was diagnosed 2 months after me. She was a non-smoker. She was a medical professional. She was my friend's sister, and we were kind of buddies, and we took classes together, and then everything was working. And sorry, it's just
Not at all.
I'm
It's
fine.
emotional. You've got this wonderful platform that
Mhm.
you have on YouTube. Talk about that a little bit.
The cardiologist called me, and because he saw that, he said, he's a man of faith, and he said, well, now God is using you to do your greatest work to help people in a even more meaningful way. But it's like, couldn't he, couldn't he have chosen something a little bit less scary,
Right. Right.
But I feel like if my suffering can help somebody, then what am I supposed to do? And I was kind of not retiring, but I was doing YouTube every day for like 4 years and 3 months. And then the doctor said, look, you just have to slow down. Like the ones that knew, like, you got to slow down a little bit. And so I said, okay, well, I'll just do it once a week. But when this happened, I did a series in January of 2025, all 31 days, and I called it Thriving in the Face of Cancer. And I'm very proud of it. It's free on my YouTube channel and on podcast. It was where I interviewed many doctors, some oncologists, and also survivors, and just people that maybe people didn't know about. And I tried to do like, this is the resource I wish I had, because when I was diagnosed, especially since I was keeping the secret, I had no resources. I
Right.
didn't know that you could contact go to for lung cancer or Immerman's Angels
Right.
and get a buddy.
Right.
I did not know that there were places when you needed a wig that actually specialized in this, not just giving you like some generic wig. There was just so many things I didn't know and that I wish I had known. And I wanted to give that to people because maybe somebody after me is going to go through this and know how scary it is. I didn't know that even if you don't go to a certain hospital, that as long as, and even if you don't have an oncologist, that if you can contact a social worker, that you can be in a support group for cancer in general or for your specific cancer. Cause I would have done it. This is real life is real. And sometimes people are doing well and sometimes they're
Yeah.
doing poorly, but I feel overall that they're a good thing. And I mean, cancer is so scary. I wish, did you ever see the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Of course.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies. So you know how Clarence the Angel, like he showed George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, what his life would have been like, how it would have been different if he had died that
Right.
day.
Right.
I wish that we could all get an angel like Clarence. I mean, it could be a human person, could just put their arm, like give you a hug and like just tell you they're
Yeah.
sorry. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I I had gone to so many doctors, and it was like I happened to go to an immunologist because I wanted her to try to unwind these allergy to see if I ever could get anesthesia. And it was in the first, this was just a few months ago. And it was the first time in like the 2.5 years since I dealt with this. She actually looked at me and she said, "Gosh, I'm really sorry you have cancer." Like, I don't know what's happened to medicine, but it's so like, I mean, that was like the biggest deal to me. Like,
Mhm.
that a doctor said, "I'm sorry,"
Right,
you know,
right.
like she meant it.
Very human
And
emotion. Yeah.
it's like, I wish they could give you a person, and I kind of have that in Francis in a way,
Mhm.
but that somebody that it could have been a little easier for me to just kind of, and that's what I'm kind of doing with Thriving in the Face of Cancer. And what I notice about people with cancer is that they I have not met one person with cancer, no matter how advanced they are or whether or not they're a survivor, that isn't willing to help somebody else with cancer. I've never been in like AA or anything like that, but I can imagine that that's kind of maybe like the idea, like somebody that's walked in your shoes. People are just in this space so kind, and they'll
Mhm.
share with you
Mhm.
everything. And I've never met like a group of people that are so giving and helpful,
Mhm.
honestly.
Chef AJ, will you continue to put, like, this type of content that you did for those 31 days in your show?
Yeah, that's what I wanna do because I'm also learning too when I do it. It helps me too,
Yeah, of course.
especially when somebody's hopeful. I mean, I just loved the messages that were given in the 31-day Thriving in the Face of Cancer, because the last question is, what would you say, what message of hope would you share with someone currently facing a cancer diagnosis? And every single person gave a message of hope. Like Dr. William Lee said, he has seen people go from stage 4 to 0.
Right.
And so, I have these people give me these bracelets,
Mhm.
that, like this one, "Today is
Mhm.
faith," that says hope.
Right.
And so there are days, and again, it's not just cancer, there are other diseases that people have that are scary. You have to have hope. Like, that is literally the most important thing to have, I think, in life.
Yep.
Faith or hope or whatever.
Right.
Um,
That's why
and if you have that,
we call this believe in progress, because you have to have belief and you have to have hope, and there's no doubt about that. I have a question. Do you counsel families about their, if they're like, I actually know a young man, a 6-year-old young man, which name we'll leave his name out, but he has a kind of a problem eating, trying different foods. Do you counsel families?
I don't anymore. I used to, but I have great people that I can refer people to that do that. I mostly, in the chef space, I love to do cooking demos and I love to teach people how to cook. So that part, but I think I can find somebody that could help a young child like that, actually.
Because I think what I've learned from reading some of your information, though, because nutrition does play a really important part in somebody's growth, right?
I think so. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I ate very poorly for the first, I'm going to say, 43 years of my life, and I think it makes a difference. Everybody says, well, my aunt was 105 and smoked cigars and whatever, but that's not necessarily your genetics. And there's a saying, genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle and diet pull the trigger. So it was being who I am and being diagnosed, I was embarrassed.
Yeah,
Here I am, Chef AJ, telling people, and people like, well, see, your diet didn't work. But did it not work, or did it delay something and make it slow growing? I don't
right.
know. I'm not, but I'm not going to give it up anyway. And I feel like, I'm still using nutrition as part of the tools. And you might be familiar with the work of Dr. Kelly Turner,
Mhm.
Radical Remission, Radical Recovery. And one of the things that all cancer survivors seem to have in common is nutrition. Now, that doesn't mean they all are following a vegan diet, but they have improved their diet in a profound way. There wasn't much left for me to improve, other than now I'm doing things like juicing every day because I feel like, it's giving me that extra burst. And yeah, it's quite a journey, as you say.
Well, I have to tell you, you're full of energy and passion, and I love that. I love the Clarence analogy because I happen to love that movie, and it's so true. It's so very true. I can only tell you that we work really hard at trying to fund the best research around the world, and as you were talking about Kaytruda, our work had something to do with that and many other things as well. So what a great honor it is for me to spend a few minutes with you, learn more about what you do. And I have a feeling you're going to be just fine. I think you've got a great attitude. Can't thank you enough for giving us a few minutes of your time today, Chef AJ.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much. And best of health to everyone watching or listening.
Chef AJ's story is a powerful reminder that health is a journey, not a destination. From her decades of plant-based advocacy to her recent cancer diagnosis, she continues to inspire us with her resilience, knowledge, and dedication to making healthy living accessible to all. If this episode moved you, like me, here's how you can take action. Explore Chef AJ's work. Check out her books, Unprocessed and The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, to learn more about plant-based eating and vibrant health. Support cancer research at AACR.org. Your donations help fund groundbreaking studies that lead to better treatments and outcomes for patients. Follow Chef AJ on YouTube and social media. Stay up to date with her journey, recipes, and insights into cancer, nutrition, and well-being. Share this episode. Help spread the message of hope, resilience, and the power of nutrition in the fight against disease. Chef AJ, thank you for sharing your journey and your wisdom with us today. Your passion for health and healing is an inspiration. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Believe in Progress. Remember, cancer research saves lives, and your support really does make a difference. Subscribe to the podcast, share this episode, and stay tuned for more inspiring stories. And remember to believe in progress in the fight against cancer. This episode was produced by College Cast LLC. And like Chef AJ said, hope, hope, hope. Thank you so much.